In the year 536, the sun vanished. This wasn't an eclipse. Summer frosts were reported. Crops failed as cold gripped the land, and the world was plunged into a sudden, terrifying darkness and famine. For centuries, people thought the stories were just myths, ancient tales of a dark time. But then, modern science found undeniable proof, frozen deep within the ice. The mystery begins with the accounts themselves. In Constantinople, the historian Procopius wrote of a year where the sun had no power. He described it as giving forth its light without brightness, much like the moon, and it stayed that way for the entire year. Procopius noted that it seemed exceedingly like the sun in eclipse, for the beams it shed were not clear. The consequences were dire, he wrote. The fruits did not ripen and the wine tasted like sour grapes. This wasn't just a local phenomenon. Historical records from Ireland to China echoed the same disaster. The Irish annals bluntly state a failure of bread in the year 536 in China. Court chronicles described yellow dust that rained down like snow, blotting out the sun. For over a year, the entire known world lived under a dim, cold, and powerless sun. What global catastrophe could possibly cause such a thing? The answer lay hidden, thousands of feet deep, preserved in the ancient ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica. These ice cores are like perfect time capsules. Every year, a new layer of snow falls and compacts, trapping atmospheric particles from that exact moment in time. By drilling down and analyzing these layers, scientists can read the atmospheric history of our planet going back hundreds of thousands of years. As they examined the ice layer corresponding precisely to the year 536 AD, scientists found the smoking gun, an unmistakable, massive concentration of volcanic aerosols. These were tiny particles, including volcanic glass and sulfates, that could only have been blasted high into the atmosphere by a colossal eruption. This wasn't just a small spike. It was one of the largest sulfate signals found in the last 2,000 years, indicating a volcanic event of immense scale. But scientific proof requires independent verification. The next piece of evidence came from an entirely different source: trees. Through a science called dendrochronology, researchers can study the life of a tree by looking at its growth rings. A wide ring means a good year with plenty of sunlight and warmth. A narrow ring indicates a year of stress, cold, drought, or lack of sun. When scientists examined ancient tree rings from all around the world, from Ireland to Scandinavia to North America, they saw the same pattern. Starting exactly in the year 536, the rings became extremely narrow. This global slowdown in tree growth was a clear sign of an unusually cold and dark year, perfectly corroborating the ice core data and the ancient historical texts. Combining the harrowing historical accounts with this hard scientific data from ice and trees, Harvard historian Michael McCormick made a bold declaration. He called 536 AD the beginning of one of the worst periods to be alive, if not the worst year. Harvard historian Michael McCormick told Science magazine in 2018, "It was a moment when history and science came together to reveal a forgotten global catastrophe." So, what was the trigger? The prime suspect is a massive volcanic eruption that occurred in the northern hemisphere, likely in Iceland. In early 536, some evidence even suggests a second major eruption followed just a few years later, around 540, which would have prolonged and intensified the cooling period. But these weren't ordinary volcanic eruptions. To cause a global dimming effect, an eruption has to be powerful enough to inject huge amounts of sulfur dioxide gas, not just into the air, but all the way up into the stratosphere, the upper layer of our atmosphere. Once there, the gas reacts with water vapor to form a fine mist of sulfuric acid droplets. This creates a reflective veil that spreads across the globe, blocking a portion of incoming sunlight and reflecting it back into space. The result is a rapid and prolonged global cooling event, often called a volcanic winter. The year 536 wasn't just a bad year. It was the trigger for a cascade of crises. The resulting period of global cooling is now known as the Late Antique Little Ice Age, and it lasted for over a century. The immediate famines caused by crop failures and the persistent cold likely fueled social unrest, disease, and mass migration. It's no coincidence that this period saw the movement of peoples like the Avars across Eurasia and created widespread instability. Furthermore, many historians believe this prolonged period of hardship weakened populations, making them more vulnerable to disease. Just a few years after the sun disappeared, in 541 AD, the first Great Plague pandemic, the Plague of Justinian, swept across the Roman Empire and beyond, killing millions. The environmental crisis of 536 may have set the stage for this biological one. Looking at the broader sweep of history, some historians argue that this climate catastrophe played a key role in the final transition from the classical world of Rome to the early Middle Ages. The environmental shock destabilized empires, redrew maps, and reshaped societies in profound ways. The year the sun vanished is a stark and powerful lesson from the past. It's a reminder that our history, our civilizations, and our very survival are profoundly shaped by the climate of our planet. It reveals how vulnerable societies can be to sudden environmental shocks and shows us that the story of humanity is inextricably linked to the story of the Earth itself, in ways we are only just beginning to fully uncover. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past. If you find these hidden histories as fascinating as we do, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories from the origins of our world. We'll see you next time.